When we have negatives with adding and when we have negatives with multiplication, they are different. So we want to make sure we're clear on how they're different. When I add with negatives, negatives and positives count against each other. So we have the same amount of negatives and positives, we get 0 pairs. So for example, if we have +1 and -1, these two together represent 0 pairs and they cancel out and we end up with 0. So when I add opposites, I get 0. Two A's and I add -2 A's, these represent 0 pairs, they cancel each other out, and again we get 0. So when I add opposites, I get 0. That's different than multiplication. So multiplying is groups of negative. So if I have -5 times A, I have -5 groups of A. That means I have -5. They don't work against each other. So -5 times A is -5A. Or if I have 5 groups of a negative term, 5 times -A means 5 groups of -A's, means I have -5A's. So they are both the same thing. So if I have one negative in a grouping or multiplication, that means my end result or my answer is negative. Okay, so in both cases, one negative, my answer has a negative. Double negatives are different. Double negatives are really important. These are opposites. And in math, when I have an opposite, they undo each other. Okay? So if I have two negative groups, one opposite cancels out the other opposite, and they undo each other to get a positive. So if I have a -5 group with a -A, well, this is opposite, which means I end up with a plus. So -5 groups of -A means I have those negatives or opposites cancel out, and I end up with a positive. And we can generalize and say that if I have odd negatives, so 1, 3, 5, we end up with a negative answer. But if I have even opposites, they will pair together and cancel out. So 2 negatives make a positive, 4 negatives make a positive, 6 negatives make a positive.